What's up, fellow movie buffs and film connoisseurs? It's your self-proclaimed cinema shogun here. And last night, for the first time in this entire investigation, Brian Laundrie's lawyer actually gave a legit interview to CNN. Now, he was off camera the whole time. He just called in. But it's better than some text messages. We know this whole time all he's been doing is sending out quick little text messages to random reporters. But last night, he gave a whole 15-minute interview to CNN. And he said a lot of interesting things. I think he cleared up a lot of questions that people had. And it's going to be all up for people to decide on themselves if they think he's lying or if he's telling the truth. Now, we know remains were found yesterday. We know some of Brian's items were found yesterday. And like many of you, I find it odd that the first day that Brian's mom goes on the search, all of this stuff is found within 10, 15 minutes of them searching. And the stuff that they found was literally at the front of the park, right off the trail, not in some super hard to find area. Literally, the parents walked straight to that area and found it. And in this interview, the lawyer tries to clear some things up. And I'm not sure if I should believe him or not. But like I said, this interview is 15 minutes long. But I suggest that all of you listen to it in its entirety. Because, I mean, for one, we've all been invested in this case for months now. So what's 15 minutes? You know what I'm saying? We've all invested enough time that I think we owe it to ourselves and owe it to this case to at least hear what this lawyer has to say. But I'm going to let y'all listen to this real quick, and then I'm going to come back and give you some of my thoughts.
Appreciate you taking the opportunity. Let's deal with the timing here. Why today? Why did the parents choose today to go to the preserve?
Well, it is my understanding that the preserve was only open to the public as of yesterday. So my clients reached out to me and informed me that they wanted to go into the preserve this morning, and I thought it would be wise to notify law enforcement of their intentions. I did so by text to my contact in the Northport Police Department, and they responded with thank you for the heads up, and then they met my clients there this morning.
Why did they meet your clients there?
Well, I presume they thought it would be a good idea just to accompany them in. They knew the press had been following my clients for weeks and weeks on end, and you'd have to ask them why they chose to come. They did not indicate to me last night that they would be there. They just, again, thanked me for the heads up.
One quick question sideways, and then I want you to take me through what you understand of how the discovery was made. Why didn't the parents ask to go sooner during all these agonizing weeks?
Well, the parents had assumed that the experts, the FBI, and all the tracking teams that they had would be able to locate Brian based upon the information that we had provided them to the specific areas and trails in the park that Brian liked to visit. The park had been closed to the public. There was really no other reason for the Laundries to go search anywhere else.
Now, let's deal with the specifics of today. Is the area that they were searching when these discoveries were made, is this a new area that the parents hadn't informed authorities about before?
No, not at all. Indeed, this is the very area of the park that we initially informed law enforcement on, I believe it was September 17th, that Brian would be most likely in the preserve in this particular area, as I know it, near the bridge. I think it's the bridge that might connect the Myakkahatchee Environmental Park with the Carlton Reserve.
Was this a very deep way or distance into the preserve?
No, Mr. Laundrie informed me that it was quite near the entrance. He didn't put an exact distance on it. He put a time frame of about 30 minutes in, but I would guess it could be a mile or two into the preserve.
So can you help us understand how an area that the authorities were told about, you say by the parents, that isn't even that deep into the preserve, wasn't located? all these weeks with all the dogs and the teams and everything else until the parents showed up?
Well, listen, the explanation that the FBI gave today certainly makes sense. If that area was underwater, one can certainly understand why you might not have been able to find the items that were located today. If that water had cleared, 2 weeks ago, perhaps could have circled back and looked again. Perhaps they meant to. Perhaps they were further deeper into the park and never got back to this park because it is so near the entrance. Chris and Roberta went to this area first, and as happenstance was, they stumbled upon these items.
All right, now the key understanding. What do you know from your clients about how the discovery was made? What was going on? What did they tell you about how it happened?
So fortunately, one of your rival news people were there with a camera. And I say fortunately because, some people don't believe how the events laid out today. But Chris and Roberta walked into the preserve. It is my understanding that they were followed closely by the two law enforcement personnel. And when I say closely, certainly within eye shot. And as they went further in, Chris ventured off the trail into the woods. He was zigzagging in different areas. Law enforcement was doing the same thing. And Roberta Laundrie was walking down the trail. And I believe that is on some video to some other news outlet. At some point, Chris locates what's called a dry bag. The dry bag is a white bag, is laying in the woods, I'll say 20 feet or so off the trail. According to Chris, it was in some bramble. Chris didn't want to pick the bag up because he wanted the law enforcement to see it. This was caught on camera. Chris couldn't find the law enforcement because they were then out of sight because Chris had been in the woods. So he didn't want to leave the bag there with the news reporter standing nearby. So he picked it up. He did meet up shortly with law enforcement. They looked at the contents of the bag. At that time, law enforcement officers showed him a picture on the phone of a backpack that law enforcement had located also nearby and also some distance off the trail. At that point, the Laundries were notified that there was also remains near the backpack, and they were asked to leave the preserve.
What do you make of the suggestion that Mr. Laundrie planted the bag and the backpack?
In nice terms, it's hogwash.
Would the authorities have known what they walked onto the trail with?
Absolutely. They met them at the gate or somewhere nearby. They walked in with them. And more importantly, Chris, this is what I said. Fortunately for the Laundries, the press was following them in the whole time.
Why wouldn't the dogs have found these remains?
You would have to ask the experts on that. That's not my expertise. If it was underwater, maybe the dogs couldn't, detect the remains underwater. Maybe the dogs were never brought back to that area. I don't know. You'd have to ask someone else that question.
What were your clients' reaction to what happened while they were there?
That also was caught on video, and, it's quite sad. You can imagine as a parent finding your son's belongings alongside some of the remains, and that's got to be heartbreaking, and I can tell you that they are heartbroken.
Do they believe it is their son?
Chris, it's not about belief. I mean, as you said at the onset, the probability is strong that it is Brian's remains, but we're going to wait until the forensic results come in and verify that.
Now, obviously, the family's under a veil of suspicion because of their lack of cooperation from the beginning, optically, in terms of contacting the Petitos, et cetera, and dealing with authorities. The police gave the impression that the family delayed notifying them about Brian Laundrie's disappearance.
Well, you said that they gave the impression. They've come out right and said it, and certain members of the Northport Police Department have said it more than once. And as I've discussed with you once before, let the record be clear. The Laundries reported Brian did not come home the night he went out for the hike. I actually reported that to the FBI personally. On Friday, the 17th, the FBI called me We didn't call them. They called me and said, we have a tip that Brian was seen in Tampa, and we want to see if he's in the house. After some back and forth, we agreed on a time. At 6:15, Friday the 17th, the FBI was going to come to the house. During that conversation, with agreeing on the time, I said to them, if you got a tip, where did this come from? Because a member of the Northport PD gave a press conference the night before and said, we know where Brian is. He was asked again, do you know where Brian is? He said, we know exactly where Brian is. I immediately called my clients and said, hey, was Brian picked up? Do you know where he is? Because I don't know where he is. How do they know where he is if we don't? And that was on Thursday. On Friday, when the FBI came to the Laundrie residence, we then said, yes, we will fill out a missing persons report. And that got twisted as though the family waited until Friday to report him missing, which is not how it happened.
It's unfair. It's unfair in the micro, but it's understandable in the macro, because it just doesn't look right that the parents haven't wanted to cooperate, that Brian didn't want to cooperate, that they wouldn't want to talk to the other family. So you can understand why people would be suspicious about their actions.
Absolutely. And, now's not the right time to talk about, the situation with Gabby, but the family was following my directions. I told them not to talk to anybody, not to say a word. I was the intermediary between the family and law enforcement. And that's why we're confident that, law enforcement, specifically the FBI, was informed. Brian did not come home that night. Whatever played out in those 3 days after that, that's on the police and the FBI. That's not on the family, as I heard.
No, you don't have to be a lawyer to be suspicious. When somebody won't cooperate with looking for someone they supposedly care about, what is the good reason that they wouldn't want to speak to authorities or to their son's fiance's family?
You can label it good reason, but I can tell you the reason. I told them not to.
And the question becomes, who doesn't talk unless they have something to hide?
And you know what? You hear a lot of talk these days about, individual rights. Some people want First Amendment rights. Some people want Second Amendment rights. Conveniently, the public seems to forget about the Fourth, the Fifth, and the Sixth Amendment rights. And you know what? Defense attorneys, and I would say every attorney, including yourself, should push those rights. Some of the experts that have been on these programs, they all espouse, this, and this. But they don't step up and say, hey, you know what? Everybody has the right to remain silent. And that's what I told my clients, and that's what they did.
There's no question they have the right. I've never suggested anything else. But having a right and something being the right thing to do are often different. Now, it has been mentioned that if and when Brian Laundrie is found, then the parents will explain the situation. If this is Brian Laundrie and he is gone, will the parents tell what they knew?
Well, now's not the time to discuss that, Chris. It may come out in the future. It may not. Right now, we're just going to wait for the forensic results, as I said earlier. And, we may come back on that subject sometime in the future.
You've known the family a long time, yes?
Well over 20 years.
Is it hard for them to follow your advice?
Hard? No. I've never had clients follow my advice so intently.
But you know what I'm saying? This is hard advice to follow. Not to talk to the Petitos, not to talk to anybody about what happened. This is not easy to do, I'm sure.
No, it's not.
They know the weight of expectation, and they know how it makes them look.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They know the weight. They know it's been hard. But ultimately, this is the advice I gave them. This is the advice they're taking, and that's on me. And I took that heat, September 14th, when I had to give a little speech in front of a camera. Somebody in front of my office got me. And I said to them, I'm the one who told them not to talk. That's been on me from day one. That's not on the family. And if it turns out that my legal advice is wrong in that perspective, so be it. But that's on me, not on the family.
Well, giving the advice is on you. Taking it is on them. They are aware that they may be the only people who are able to tell the story of what happened to Gabby?
At some point in time, Chris, as I said earlier, now's not the time to discuss that. Right now, we're going to wait for the forensic results to come in, and we may revisit this in the future.
All right, Counselor, look, I appreciate, especially last second like this, you coming on to explain how they came to be there today and the correction on what they told authorities and when about the disappearance. And we'll take you at your word that there's a chance that once this is cleared up, that it's Brian, the family want to make a proffer of what they knew, because obviously the curiosity is immense, especially for the Petito family. Appreciate you taking the opportunity.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you having me on tonight. Be well.
All right, you too.
Okay, so let's try to break this down piece by piece. From the beginning, he says that they go to the part of the reserve that they've already told law enforcement where they thought Brian would be. So, if he is telling the truth, that means that law enforcement has been out here searching everywhere, except for the spot where they told them to look in the first place. This spot where they found these so-called remains and these items that belonged to Brian was literally not too far away from where his Mustang was parked. It's literally the first place anyone would have searched. And that's why all of this just seems so unbelievable. So if he is telling the truth, and the parents told them that they needed to search this area, then why didn't they? And how come the parents could go out there and find all this stuff in 20 minutes, but hundreds of FBI agents and cadaver dogs and all of these other things, they couldn't find anything at all? It just doesn't seem right to me. The main thing that sticks out to me in this interview is when the lawyer says the whole time that this little search was taking place yesterday, that the Laundries were an eye shot of the law enforcement agents that were out there with them. He said that the law enforcement agents had eyes on the Laundries the whole time, right? But then 30 seconds later, he says that when Brian Laundrie's father found this dry bag, that he couldn't find a law enforcement agent to give it to because they were nowhere around at the time. So which one is it, Bertolini? Did the officers watch them the whole time? Or was Brian Laundrie's dad out of sight when he found this bag? Now we know we have it on video when he supposedly went into these bushes and then he comes out with this dry bag. But why would the lawyer say that the law enforcement agents were watching them the whole time when they clearly wasn't? They clearly weren't. He even says it himself 30 seconds later. Go back and listen for yourself. Literally 30 seconds after he says that, he says that Brian's dad finds this dry bag, but he can't find anyone to give it to. So he has to walk and go find a law enforcement agent to give it to. So therefore, obviously, they didn't see when this happened. And I know personally, from everything that I saw went down yesterday, that those agents, those two officers that went in with the Laundries, were not with them the whole time. In fact, Brian's dad and his mom went off to one side, and that's where they so-called found this dry bag. The police officers went over to another side, and the other side is where they so-called found the remains and the backpack. So this whole thing about, the officers saw the Laundries the entire time and they were close together. That is not true, people. That is not true. Never in a million years did I think that this lawyer's voice was going to sound like this. It almost doesn't match his face in a way. He kind of sounds like a Home Alone villain, like Joe Pesci. And I just don't trust it. You don't hear New York accents like this as much anymore. I feel like the New York accent is starting to go away as more and more people, pour into New York. It seems like the old school New York accents are going away. And there's something about these accents that in situations like this, it makes you wonder, like you're on edge, like you almost don't trust it. It's like an old school mob movie or something, So this dude sounds like Joe Pesci, and he's sitting on here just saying all types of things that aren't adding up. I mean, I guess they add up, but at the same time, the circumstances are it's just too easy. It's just too convenient that his clients just went out there and found this stuff just like that. And then now all of a sudden he wants to talk and start giving interviews the very next day. Man, we've been going through this for months. He could have stepped up and said something weeks ago, and all of the crazy stuff that's been going on would have been a little less crazy had he been out there trying to reassure the public, at least for his clients, since his clients aren't saying anything. But as you heard, he told them not to say anything. Now understand, telling your clients not to talk to law enforcement and that you're going to mediate those conversations, that's understandable. But you advise your clients not to answer Gabby Petito's family's phone calls? Why is that? It's obviously because you know what Brian did. You know, and he kind of dodged those questions in this interview when he was asked, like, well, will Brian's parents come out and give more information about what they know? Because if these are Brian's remains, the only people in this world who know what happened to Gabby, or who might know what happened to Gabby and how all of this transpired, would be the parents. But you see, he wouldn't deny that. He wouldn't confirm that. He just said that we may discuss that in the future. So that tells me right now, he knows how all this went down. He might not know exactly what happened to Brian, but he knows what happened to Gabby, and he knows Brian is guilty of what happened to Gabby. And the fact that he advised these clients not to say anything this whole time, it's really a misstep on his part. Because let's say it's all real. Let's say it's all real and they actually called the police when they were supposed to, and they did everything they were supposed to behind the scenes. Then why would you advise your clients not to speak to the Petito family? Why would you advise your clients not to just give some sort of press conference, just to say something, when everything is just going crazy all around them? You got the protesters outside. We all know all the madness that's been going on. And it could have all ended so long ago if they just came out and said something. If they just came out and showed some concern. But they did not, and they have not. Not for a single moment. So before I could feel bad for them, I have to take into account the fact that they didn't show no remorse, and they brought this on themselves by saying nothing. As parents, they could have picked up Gabby Petito's family's phone call. But now we have two sets of parents, possibly, who've lost their child. And it all could have been prevented. And what may have transpired with Brian could have been prevented if the family just said something from the beginning. I would believe that as a parent, you would rather see your son face the consequences of his actions as opposed to having to go out into a swamp and find pieces of his body and a few of his belongings. And that didn't have to happen. It didn't have to go down like that if they just said something from the beginning. So all in all, this whole entire interview is basically just a lawyer putting the blame for everything on law enforcement, saying that they told law enforcement where to look, he doesn't know why law enforcement couldn't find him, and that every step of the way, they've been telling law enforcement everything they can, yet law enforcement has been giving press conferences and telling us that the Laundries have been uncooperative and that they think the Laundries know more and this, that, and the third. But from what he's saying, every step of the way, the Laundries have been cooperative. They've been telling them everything they know, and that the police have basically just been dropping the ball. Which all leads me back to what I told y'all last night in that video. We're dealing with one of two things here. Either this is a whole entire elaborate freaking scheme by the Laundries, and this lawyer that sounds like Joe Pesci, this Home Alone texting lawyer, or we got a complete and utter embarrassment of an investigation by the FBI. It has to be one of the two. It has to be. And like I said, this whole entire interview is just basically the lawyer just putting the blame for everything on law enforcement without doing it, without just saying, hey, blame law enforcement for everything. No, he didn't just say it like that, but basically everything he said is just like, yeah, we told him this, we told him that, we pointed him this way, we showed him this, we told him about this. Yet here they are saying this and this. He said that they told the police and the FBI that they couldn't find Brian, and then the same day the police said that they knew where Brian was. And he's like, how do y'all know where Brian was when we don't even know where Brian is? So all of this is just one big clusterfuck. It is one big clusterfuck. But I want to know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. Do you believe the lawyer? Or do you halfway believe? Do you at least partially believe what he's saying? Or do you think it's all a lie? Do you think this is all just another trick that was up the Laundrie sleeve? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up button. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Ring that notification bell. Go to the description of this video. I posted a new video over on my other channel last night I want you guys to check out. So go check that out. Also leave a link to my CashApp if you want to support the channel, and a link to my Twitter if you want to follow me on there. But as always, find some time out of your day to go watch a movie.